Welcome to another edition of eYe in Education. I'm your host, Ed Leicius, and joining me today is the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Mary Andrade. Dr. Andrade, welcome back again.
Thank you.
And we're in the throes of March Madness in the NCAA and budget madness, not only for the school district, but for the city of Nashua as they prepare for the next fiscal year budget. And we're going to talk about the school budget and start from where you began and where it's at now before going to public hearing and then the final adjudication of it by the Board of Aldermen. You started work on the budget last year for this year.
Yep.
And came in, if I recall correctly, at about 9% beginning.
Yep.
And you've been able to pare that down to about 6%, and the mayor's looking for 3%.
Correct.
So how did we get to where we are, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, no, it's a great process, quite honestly. I think we're always in the budget process and reviewing. As soon as we get our budget and the final number, we're preparing the year out. So the 8% or thereabouts, close to 9%, was really about if we rolled everything over. If we took all our teachers, all our staff, all our bills, and we just projected that to next year with an increase of whatever the contractual obligations were. If we put a 3% on electricity, transportation we know is going up, I think, another 18%. So if we just took all those numbers and projected it forward, it would be about an 8.8% increase. That's unheard of. And we know we can't go to the taxpayers and the Board of Education saying we need a 9% increase. That's I think of all the history of when I've been a superintendent. In those years, like asking for a 2% was like a lot. And now like we're going in like potentially an 8, potentially a 6. So we go from those numbers. But from November through January, myself, our central administration team, Crystal DeGray, the COO, our assistant superintendents, we meet with every department in every school to go over their priorities. So we look at student data, we look at whatever data they're presenting, what's their forecast, and then we start building the budget to be what's realistic. We look at our teaching staff, our para-educators, number of secretaries, our curriculum budget, and then we start paring it down. And so once we meet with all 19 schools, all the departments, then we start prioritizing. We are one Nashua. So where we, like if we ask for a 6%, where are those investments going to be made? The building principals and department chairs do a fabulous job presenting what they need in their departments or in their schools, but at the end of the day, we can't get everything. So we start really working as a district to say what's our key priorities. And there'll be some shifts this upcoming year. For example, we'll probably talk about the high school schedule and that shift there, but we're also looking at, we have some schools, our CSI school, which is Dr. Chris, and some of our ATSI schools. So CSI is a school that's identified as the lowest 5% in the state. So we've looking at our budget, we know we need to invest more personnel in that position. Same thing, we have about 3 schools that are assisted targeted support intervention. So they're not as low as Dr. Chris, but they're in the next bucket. We also know we need to invest there. So we'll be reallocating some resources to those schools for more math and reading intervention teachers as opposed to investments in different areas. So, and we have that conversation and we're able to justify it with other building principals, like you might lose a teacher at North or South and they're moving down to, or that position's going to get reallocated to the just to try to say revenue neutral. So it is, it's a hard process. I actually like the process because it's on data, it's student focused, and then we kind of move forward from there. But it's difficult. It's always a sense of loss. We're not going in saying, hey, here's all the sexy and innovative things we're doing next year. It's, it'll be a sense of loss and restructuring.
And part of the whole process, too, you have a strategic plan that was put in place in 25 through 30, and you've got 4 focus areas mainly. The first one being climate, culture, and community engagement.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your vision there and where you hope to take it takes you.
Yeah, that's about people, right? So climate, culture, if whether it's our staff, our students, there's a sense of belonging. You know, if they feel that strong sense of community, they feel empowered, they have agency, then we're able to kind of move forward. So we know it's building that community. And the other aspect of that strategic focus area one is about community engagement. We need to do a better job of engaging our community members, our parents, the nonprofits, the churches, and special education groups, families, our ELL families. We need to bring them closer into the school. So we're going to be really working hard on the outreach to those in the community so that there is that sense of belonging. But to me, climate and culture says a lot, right? If you feel valued, if you feel empowered, there's a sense of connectivity between you and your colleagues, you and your students, then you're willing to actually go the extra mile, right? So, so that's the sense of really, and if we have a strong foundation in our people, then I think we can actually do a lot of work moving forward and having those courageous conversations. And we talk about our vision statement about leading with curiosity. I think as we're talking about change in our budget and redistricting and configuration of schools, we have to be curious. And it goes back to focus area one. Do we have a strong community, a strong sense of belonging that we can engage in those conversations?
And you also recently completed a facility study, and everyone is just waiting with bated breath to see, will my school be the school that gets targeted for closing and moving the kids around? And nobody wants that, but facing the reality of the declining enrollment, the need for substantial expenditure of funds to to bring buildings up to today, it's something that is going to have to be addressed.
Yep. So the report hasn't been finalized yet, so it's about 85% there. So you can't find it online yet, but we've had a series of 2 community meetings. We'll be having a third later this spring. There is some information on the website about some preliminary options. But again, I think it goes back to what does our schools look like in 2050 or 2060 and beyond? And I think it's envisioning what schools look like. So we spent about 30 hours over the summer with a group of about 40 people talking about what do the schools really look like? What's the educational spaces look like? Are they warm, safety-wise, the configuration? What does teaching and learning look like in the classroom? And it's really exciting. And I think what we're going to be able to use is that facility report on what happens 30 years from now. However, in the interim, there's 5 options out there right now. And that's, I think, getting people nervous. One is to do nothing. And I don't think that's reasonable. If we do nothing, we keep all the current configuration, over the next 10 years, I think it's over $200 million worth of just minor repairs. That's a big investment kind of moving forward. And then we've talked into different options. Do we just close Mount Pleasant? We've been talking about closing Mount Pleasant, I think, for the last 25 years, right? So that's been on the docket. So only close Mount Pleasant. Another option is, do you close Mount Pleasant and Amherst Street and build a new school in that area? Do you close New Searles and Bicentennial and build a new school in that area? So what we envision over the next year is really, again, getting community input on what do the schools look like in the future. However, when we say that, if we're closing your school, we saw this 2 years ago when we say we're closing Mount Pleasant, that school community gets very active. Right now, there's talk about closing New Searles, and that's, just discussion. It's not in the plans, but that community is getting very active. But it's, we're going to have to really work with the city on one Nashua, what does it look like, and show that vision so that someone has a hope and aspirations of where we're moving to. So we're gaining something. It's not just a sense of loss.
And concepts change. I think we've caught up and reconfigured all of the open concept schools that were built back in the day, because that was the way to go. Last time you were on, and I hadn't thought about it till you mentioned it, but Bicentennial is 50 years old. And the outside looks great, and the inside, the walls look nice and everything, but the infrastructure is 50 years old. And then the two high schools are 25 years old, and the number one thing that you're looking at there, just the roofs before you even get into the infrastructure of there. So we don't, I think, when they hear talking schools, we don't look at the bigger picture of, well, yeah, these schools are 50 or 25 years old, and the technology has changed.
And just even the learning styles, more collaboration, that flexible learning. So that's what we want to really, like, how do our schools reflect the future and future engagement around deeper learning. And we think with the declining enrollment, if there's some investment in our schools, with the open enrollment, can we actually draw more families in? So, part of the strategic plan, focus area 4 is about innovation, research, and design. Can we build something in the reconfiguration of our schools that will actually draw more families to the Nashua schools? And that's our plan as well. So how do we, over the next couple of years, be strategic on, surveying the community to be, do we want a STEM magnet school? Do we want a language school? Is there a different CTE pathway starting at the middle school? So we want to be really open and flexible on how do we retain our families and actually possibly recruit families from other districts that want to come to Nashua. We're very proud of our schools. I think Nashua is very proud of their schools. So let's open the doors and get more people in and get a little more revenue. So.
And the changing concept is evident at McCarthy. There are those open study areas in the hallways and open spaces. So it's being addressed. And how's that? We've had some time to see that function. How has that worked?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, the culture is absolutely a lot different than Elm Street. There's, number one, fewer students, so there's not as many kids in the hallways. But you don't see kids meandering around the hallways anymore. They're working in clusters. So you might have a 6th grade team that's 4 teachers. They're all in one cluster. They don't have to leave that section of the building. There's a bathroom in there. There's water fountains. So there's actually no unnecessary movement for students to be walking in around the school. And if you were walking around Elm Street, you needed a GPS just to get back where you were going. You could get lost for weeks in that building. But it's just calmed the environment down. It's just the natural light in that building. Just again, it's a calming kind of presence. And of course, at the end of the day, what really makes the difference is the students and the adults. They've come together as a sense of community. So we've seen attendance up, we've seen student growth up, behaviors down. So it's really turned into a nice community over there.
One of the other growing expenses is the area of special education. And there are some placements that really the city has no say in. They are mandated. And on the other hand, there are some services that we offer that we do get some monies back. Now, those monies, do they go to offset the expenditures of the school department, or do they go into the city's general fund?
So there's a special revenue fund. So our Signs of Learning, we're one of 2 districts in the state that actually offers a K through 12 Signs of Learning program, and that's for our students of hearing impaired. So when students come in from a different district, that goes into a special revenue fund, and then we could use that to offset some of the costs. So it doesn't go to the city. Same thing with our Brentwood Academy, which is a high school school over on Franklin Street. We have students from other districts. That goes into a special revenue fund, and then we use that to offset some of the costs of contractors that we can't find, or teachers, and then we use a contractor. So we'll use that money.
And that's the biggest challenge, your workforce shortages, not only there, but I know we've made some strides, and the court order has been lifted with respect to the ELL,
Yeah.
but you still need more there, given the number of students that we're serving.
Yeah, so in this year's budget, we're requesting another 6 ELL teachers. As you said, we've made significant gain over the last 3 years in recruiting ELL teachers. When I first came here in 2022, we had, I think, about 37, 38 ELL teachers, and now we're up to about 55. And it used to be a 55-to-1 ratio of students to teachers, and now we're down to 35-to-1. That's still not a good place to be, but we can't be hiring 10 to 15 teachers at a time in ELL, just for budget-wise. The other thing is we can't find enough ELL teachers in the state to actually help service. So every year we're plugging away. And then, as you said, special education's a rising cost. Out-of-district tuitions, placements, those tuitions are going up. And that could be anywhere from a $70,000 day placement where a student's at to over $400,000. And again, if the student needs that service, we're kind of, our hands are tied on that. So that's been really difficult. And then just even in district, finding the right amount of paraeducators, special education teachers, that work, that flow of entry and recruitment. There's just not a lot of special education teachers graduating from college to replace people retiring. And then the need for paraeducators, we're seeing a shift on, we think of paraeducators back, like
Right.
that person helping with reading and math goals. What we're really needing is paraeducators who have a background in behavior. So how do you work on those behavior goals? So the role is really changing.
And, plant operations, you touched it a little bit, but, something perhaps people won't understand because McCarthy is so new.
Right.
A lot of the big ticket items over there are on 1-year warranties and they're expiring, so that's going to cause about a 4.5% increase, just that alone.
Right.
And as well as the upkeep and maintenance of the buildings, and the older they are, I guess they do need a little more TLC during the course of the year.
Yeah, I think as a community, when we start really putting things out there, is we have over $1 billion worth of assets. And when you put that in perspective, like that's a lot, right? And so, can we actually have adequate upkeep on our buildings for $500,000 a year in deferred maintenance? Or, go into the city on capital improvement projects that might be over $1 million. But that only goes so far, right? It's like when you have over $1 billion worth of assets that you have to take care of. Like we did repave some of the North High School parking lot last year. Like that was over $800,000 for one paving project, right? So it's when we put things in perspective on how do you keep the buildings in optimum condition for our students and the adults working there, it's a big investment.
I noticed too, you get under your capital budget plans for several roof replacements and some deferred maintenance that have been put off for some years, increasing security systems, as well as air filtering systems. So those are big ticket items that perhaps someone out there may not think of,
Right.
but they all go kind of hand in hand with the operation of the schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And the roofs are obviously a big ticket item, something that, you need a roof, like, right? And you don't want, we have the history in this city that we don't want another Penachuk incident
Right.
happening, so we need to be proactive. As you said, our high school roofs are both 25 years old. There's only so many patches you can, put on before you need a replacement, and that's huge square footage. But the security cameras, right? We know security is, foremost at this point, but a lot of our systems are getting outdated. They're not even making the models to replace them anymore. So we're in communication on how do we update our security cameras, the hardware and software behind those. But every school has robust cameras connected to the doors, connected to the security vestibules, but in the next couple of years, we'll need a major overhaul in that system.
And security is very important. You're correct. Looking at your priorities, there are those that are mandated by the federal government and the state government. And then you have a list of nice to haves. And some of them would be some math and reading interventionists and the behavioral staff. And, schools are taking on a new role when it comes to that area that before was really never talked about.
Right.
If there was a behavioral problem, it was dealt usually between the school and the parents, and but it's now become front and center.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about behavior problems, it's not the student who's smoking in the bathroom, right? Cutting class, like some of the behavior issues, it's more social emotional well-being, mental health issues where students need a lot more learning how to behave in school, the difference between right and wrong, and what behaviors are we decreasing. So it's not just the old go to the principal's office, take you 2 nights detention or a suspension. It is really working with students and families and mental health providers on what is appropriate behaviors. And that's been a lot of work. So that's where, again, that shift in that paraeducator, do we need more registered behavior therapists, more BCBAs, but it's really about working with families on what is an appropriate behavior.
When we began, you talked about the increase in transportation costs, and playing the devil's advocate for a moment, some would say, well, you don't have to bus high school students.
Right.
So can't you save money if you don't do that? And then as we sit here in the studio, we look out here on Riverside Drive and envision no high school students being bused, but all being brought to school or driving to school with their own vehicles.
Right.
And you're talking about a monster of a parking lot.
Right, they're
traffic
going to
problem.
have to open the gate on Route 3
Yeah.
to have another entrance. So we look at the numbers of ridership at all levels to see if we can consolidate. High school students need to pay, but it is a minimal amount to ride the buses. But we do look at that consolidation. But we also know if we don't provide transportation to some of our families, the students will never come to school. So that's not an expense that'll be well worth it if we can't get students to school.
And some would say, well, why don't you go out and look, rebid the bus contract? I guess there aren't a lot of busing companies out there today, unlike several years ago.
They're really not. I mean, First Student is a great partner. Even if we look at our contract for the next 4 years, or in year 1 of a 5-year contract, we are still actually paying less than surrounding districts. So we don't have the highest. It's a lot of money. I'm not going to deny that. But we are not the highest district around us. So, and First Student has been great partners. Anytime we can pick up the phone, we always can get better. We're always in conversations with them, but it is a lot of money. They are a good partner, but we always try to find those savings.
And you don't like to talk about layoffs, but depending what happens with the budget, with the Mayor and Board of Aldermen going forward, it may come down to that, and that's something you do have to kind of plan for. And are there any soft or hard figures at what might be if you don't get the 6 that you're looking for,
Yeah.
or you only get 3, or?
Well, even with the 6%, we'll look at reducing about 60 positions. So that's about 27 teachers, 15 or so paraeducators, 4 administrators, a couple secretaries. So that's even at a 6%. So anything less, it would be a couple more cuts. And that's going to be the hardest aspect of it. And the conversation came up on, well, what happens if we get a 7%? I think we really need to go into our strategic plan and say, if we get more money, where are we reinvesting? Do we keep on doing the same thing year after year, or we say, hey, we got another 0.5%, which is about $700,000, is there a better way to invest? So are we looking again at that innovation, trying something new, reinvesting in different ways? So I really want to be careful, no matter what the number is let's look at academic return on the investment and invest it in the most priority, our biggest priority areas.
Are you hoping to accomplish some of that through attrition, some of the positions?
We
or-
actually did not get a lot of retirements this year. So this is our lowest in a number of years. We typically get between 40 and 50 retirements per year. We had 19. So it's going to be difficult. And then, not that they're always in the right position, right? So
Right.
like if we have a second grade teacher who retires, we need a second grade teacher. So so there'll be a lot of movement this spring.
And then those will say that with the enrollment at the high school going down, why do you need so many assistant principals?
Yeah.
Can't you do with 3 or 4 less? But they all play significant roles beyond just having that title and filling an office over there.
Yeah, and I think that's critically important on what is the roles and responsibilities. So if we think assistant principals are all just about discipline, they're not, right? So again, what's that teaching and learning? How are they working with department chairs and teachers, really increasing instruction in the classroom, academic rigor, but it's just not about discipline. And we have an incredible administrative team, pre-K through central office. Really, it's about getting to know students, getting to know the adults who work in our buildings, and again, going back to focus area 1 on that sense of belonging. So yes, you can make quick cuts and say we're getting rid of administrators. That's not my recommendation, but it is really about that sense of community and knowing what people's jobs are.
Well, the next few weeks and months will be interesting to watch it play out. And as always, we appreciate your transparency, openness, and willingness to come on here and discuss the issues of the day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've been talking to Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Maro Andrade. You've been watching eYe on Education. I'm Ed Leash, your host, and we'll see you next time.